Thank you all for coming today. There's quite a few of you, which is very exciting to see. So we're all here today to look at Greenpeace's international campaign on protecting the oceans. When I went through this presentation, I just wanted to share with you from a personal perspective. I was really touched and I got quite emotional actually about how much human activity is affecting the oceans that I think really isn't spoken about enough in the media or amongst people like in everyday life. It affects like all kinds of different animals, from these beautiful big blue whales to little seahorses, and it's also contaminating our very own food chain from the food that we're eating. So whether you eat fish or seafood, you'll see through this presentation how it really affects like all aspects of living life, and it's really so sad to see. And the fact as well that a lot of this is caused by human activity. You know, and it's getting like worse as we get increased access to technology, the deep sea mining, and just we're now able to access places that we weren't able to access before, and it's just creating a great bigger problem and to very vulnerable species and very vulnerable like life in the living ocean. So I just wanted to share that with you to begin with as a personal kind of perspective that I had when I went through the presentation. So as I mentioned, this is Greenpeace's international campaign on protecting our oceans. Some of you might or might not be aware, but we only have one ocean because all of the oceans are connected. So oceans cover 71% of the planet. So what does that mean? It means that every second breath that we're taking is actually coming from the ocean. That surprised me because everybody talks about the rainforest, but actually the oceans are equally important for our very own oxygen that we're breathing. It also affects lots of other things like the climate, providing food and livelihoods to so many people around the world, and also the amazing wildlife that we just saw on the video with David Attenborough. They're all being affected, from the gigantic blue whales to the little penguins, from the forests of kelp. All of these living beings are being affected by the contamination that we're currently seeing. So healthy oceans, they're crucial to all life on Earth, and they're becoming increasingly more and more under threat, which is why it's so important that we work together to help protect them. So what are the threats to the ocean? So there are lots of different things. Often because the oceans are more out of sight, we don't think so much about how our daily actions are affecting them. But it ranges from like plastic pollution to deep sea fishing to mining. Just on so many different levels we are threatening the ocean from our day-to-day living. So I'm just going to go through some of these now. I'm sad to say that we've been quite slow to acknowledge our threats to the ocean, so we've got a lot of work to do to make up for this. So if we start with destructive fishing, you might have heard the saying, there's plenty more fish in the sea. Well, we're coming to a point where actually that's not true, and there's not so many fish left in the sea anymore. The fishing that we're seeing, this mass fishing by these deep sea trawlers, it's affecting so many different species in the water because of the food chain, and it's causing fish to have to migrate to other parts of the ocean, affecting other species in the ocean. And then secondary from that, these big trawlers, they're also impacting on dolphins and sea turtles who are also getting caught up in these nets. And they sadly, like, some of them get suffocated, and it's not intentional, but this is what's happening. So habitat destruction, there's like large areas of coral reefs that are getting destroyed, and this is, you know, like food and home to many of these like living species. We have a lot of illegal and illicit fishing, and sadly to say, there's hardly any ocean that's off limits and that are truly protected from all of this activity. So if we look at climate change, some of you might have heard of the Save the Arctic campaign or the Protect the Antarctic campaign that have shone a light on how fragile the world is at the frozen poles. You can see here in this picture the little seals that are only left with a tiny little bit of ice to survive on. But climate change is also having a big impact on the rest of the ocean too, and this is affecting lots of different kinds of species, and this is causing them to move to find food and have to adapt to these changing patterns. The effects of this is that it's pushing many of them towards extinction. So a healthy ocean is really, really important to help tackle climate change. Things like kelp, seagrass and mangroves, they help protect the coastlines and also lock in the carbon. So with everything that we're seeing with the bushfires in Australia and the forest fires in the Amazon, devastating, but equally devastating is what's happening in our oceans. Deep sea mining. So this is, as I was mentioning at the beginning, with the advancement of technology, it's meant that companies can get to places that they weren't able to get to before. And these places are very fragile. You know, the life that is there, they grow at a very slow pace. And the impact that we're having on them through this deep sea mining is potentially irreversible. So what is this for? What are they deep sea mining for? Well, it's for things like iPads, iPhones, the minerals that they get from that. Scientists estimate that the damage could be irreversible due to the delicate structure, and we really shouldn't be plundering to these depths without fully understanding the consequences of our actions. So oil drilling, this is another big thing that you might have heard a lot about, fossil fuels and the burning of fossil fuels. They create a big threat to climate change, but in terms of the oceans, you know, some of the threats that it causes is through oil spills that can affect so much marine life, and because it is the ocean and things spread so quickly and easily, it's really difficult to kind of correct once these disasters have taken place. This is also, it's not just like affecting the marine life, it's also poisoning the entire food chain if we're looking at a society and a population that's eating fish and eating seafood. So plastic pollution, this has become a very kind of topical issue that is spoken about a lot. And if we look at why plastic pollution is such a big problem, plastic, why was plastic invented? Plastic was invented because it's light, but it's also very kind of like durable. This is a big problem in the ocean. It causes a big problem for the marine life. And you know, like, it's very hard for plastic to disintegrate. It turns into these tiny like microplastics that the fish start to consume. It gets consumed by seafood, so in oysters, in mussels. This creates a big health problem for populations and societies that are consuming seafoods. And many people, I mean, how many people here realise that plastic might be being consumed by the oysters that they're eating and the mussels that they're eating? It's not something that I was so knowledgeable about. So the other effects is that it's causing the choking of like whales and seabirds, injuring turtles. It really has devastating effects. It gets embedded in the coral reefs and at the polar ice poles. Plastic is really a very toxic substance, and to create the plastic we need to have the burning of fossil fuels, so it's creating like multi-layered contamination at different levels. And the other interesting fact with this is as it says here, every 60 seconds a dumper truck worth of plastic ends up in our ocean. So if we look at the time of this talk, 20 minutes or 15 minutes, that is a lot of plastic just in this short time that we're here together that is ending up in our oceans from a truckload of waste that we don't, we put out our rubbish, we don't see where it ends up, but actually here is where it's ending up. I have some good news for you finally. It's not all bad. So Greenpeace is trying to work on a solution for this. And that is to have 30% of the ocean protected by 2030. So the plan is that we would have this 30% of the ocean protected from oil drilling, from mining, from the dumping of waste, and it would give an opportunity for entire ecosystems from the very deepest parts of the ocean to be able to have the time and the space to replenish. This could be a major breakthrough in helping the survival of our oceans. So this is what 30% of ocean protection could look like. So if you look at the pink areas, that is what the campaign is focusing on. The problem with this is that these are what is called high sea areas. So they are out of national jurisdiction, and it's something that Greenpeace has to campaign about, these communal areas that make up a whopping half of the planet's surface area. So the campaign is planning to change this at UN level, at government level, trying to get countries working together to agree that these communal areas of the ocean will be protected. So this is the ship, the Greenpeace ship that goes on the pole-to-pole expedition. And what it does in this expedition is that it takes photos and it puts a spotlight on some of the key areas where the ocean needs to be protected. So Greenpeace is working with scientists on this, and it's presenting the research and the data at the United Nations and also to governments at a multitude of different levels. The ship's called Esperanza, and Greenpeace are using the images and messages from the high seas to convince the government and also the United Nations that this is a campaign that we all really need to be working together on. So this is the route, starting in the Arctic and finishing in the Antarctic. It is building on the Save the Arctic and Protect the Antarctic campaigns. So if we follow the route down, in the Arctic we can see melting ice caps. The Lost Sea, we see deep sea mining. In Sargasso Sea, we see a lot of plastic waste contamination. The Amazon reef, which is close to my heart because it's such a beautiful area of the world, there's a lot of oil drilling and licensing for oil drilling in the Amazon reef. Mount Vemer, we see a lot of destructive fishing in biodiverse undercurrents. In the Southwest Atlantic, heavy shipping. And in the Antarctic, as I'm sure you've seen many photos and videos, a lot of climate change and industrial fishing. So this is the Global Ocean Treaty progress that we've made so far. We're in a pre-penultimate negotiations in New York in August. There has been progress made, but there's a lot more work to be done to get this to the UN negotiations in March. The UK government has shown support for it, and it's committed to protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030. This is alongside other countries like Belgium and Costa Rica and Kenya, but the treaty at the moment isn't strong enough, and what we risk is a weak treaty that won't do enough to protect our oceans. So what can you do to help? Well, sadly we have limited space on the boat, but you can follow the progress of it on social media. And what's really important is to campaign, to sign petitions, to speak to your local MP, to put pressure on the Prime Minister that we send a senior minister to the UN negotiations in March, to really put a lot of pressure on the, we protect this 30% of ocean. Other things that you can do is, most importantly, pass it on to other people. Myself, I didn't realise how important the oceans were until I went through this presentation. And when I really thought about it, I really thought it's so sad that for my own kind of desires to have a new phone, or to be able to have a bag that's easier to carry, all of these poor animals are suffering, and also it's affecting my children or my grandchildren's ability to survive on this planet. So I hope you've learned something from this presentation and been a little bit inspired to do something to help and protect the ocean, so that we can at least have 30% that can get built up and be a protected area for this marine life and for the future survival of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. I'll put the video back on now. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I don't know if I'll be able to answer it, but I can certainly try and get the information for you if there is anything. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah?
Why can't we just close down the plastics factory?
I know, well.
It's at the Lake District, isn't it? Because Hugh, what's his name, and Anita Rani did a 3-part documentary about plastics in the summer, and they went to visit, I think it's near the Lake District,
Yeah.
where it's all made.